Good morning. God is certainly good. I'm going to start by bearing a testimony. For our visitors, I apologize because you don't have a little bit of the background. For those of you who attend here, you probably know that I've been on the prayer list for a while. And on St. Patrick's Day, which I'm an elementary school principal, and so St. Patrick's Day is probably one of my least favorite. That and April 1st are probably the two least favorite days of an elementary principal's job, because those 2 days kids decide that it's okay to pinch people and it's okay to do crazy stuff. And so this St. Patrick's Day was weird in a different sense. For the past year or so, I've been having some pretty chronic pain. In fact, I was sitting here thinking as I saw Jared and Stacy with Miri, I thought, I was here the morning that she was blessed, but Karen and I had to leave early because I was feeling just terribly sick. Don't tell my wife, but I'm kind of hard-headed. And so through all the pain that I've been having, I just kind of thought, well, it'll get better. It'll get better. It'll get better. And I just kind of ignored it and thought, well, it'll get better someday. But finally, St. Patrick's Day morning, I woke up and I thought, okay, it's not getting better. And I better do something about it. And so I texted my doctor. Fortunately, I have a doctor who responds to text messages, which is really handy. I texted him and said, I'm just really having some really bad pain. And he texted me back, said, well, let's get you scheduled for a CAT scan. So about 2:30 in the afternoon, I got a CAT scan, and I got it in an outpatient place where they just sent me to a lab. And I left there and went home. I was kind of taking a nap, and I got a call from one of the doctors in my GI doctor's practice, and he said, you need to go to a hospital right now. Here's the 3 hospitals. You pick which one you want to go to, but you need to just literally put your shoes on, get in the car, go to one of those hospitals, and tell me which one you're going to. And so I thought, okay, that seems a little extreme, but I'll go ahead and follow directions. So I went to the hospital, and I checked in about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and by 7 o'clock I was in surgery, getting a grapefruit-sized abscess taken off my small intestine. They removed about a foot of my small intestine, and it was perforated, which I guess means it was kind of leaking, whatever abscesses have, which is really bad stuff. And so I was in the hospital for 8 days, which I didn't really know people were in the hospital for 8 days anymore. I thought that was a bygone thing. I know when Kara had Jacob, it was 2 days and you're out. But apparently an abscess, you get 8 days, which was a long time to be in the hospital. I'd never been in the hospital before. And so I was off work for a month, which I also didn't know doctors told you to not go to work for a month. And so I went from not being able to walk to the nurse's station the next day to I went back to work this last week. And I know that so many of my blessings were because of all those who were offering up prayers on my behalf. And so I'd like to thank this congregation for all your prayers. I get to have another surgery in about 3 or 4 months to put some things back together. I guess when you have a foot of your small intestine taken out, they really tear things up, and so I have to get some things fixed in a while. So I know more about my body and how it works than I ever wanted to know. If you have questions about how your small intestine works, let me know. I can try to help. But God has been good, and I appreciate your prayers, and I appreciate being part of a church where, as I was leaving work that day to go get my CAT scan, I stopped by the financial planning offices of the Gilmore and Andersons, because I knew that there would be 3 elders there, and figured as long as 2 of them are there and have a minute to give me an administration, that would be a real blessing. And so I'm thankful that we have the support that we do and the congregation we have, and so God is certainly good. Now I'm going to address a little bit more to Landon, because you've made a pretty big and momentous decision today. And up until now, I think a lot of times, I remember when I was 7 and 8, right before I got baptized, I remember thinking one of the things I was most excited about was being able to take communion. Well, that's going to be so cool and so exciting. And I know that that's one of those things where I think most kids, when they're about to be baptized, that's one of the things they look forward to the most. But there's a lot of responsibility that comes with this too. And there's so many parts to it that you'll grow about and you'll learn about as you get older and older. But you are now a member of the church, and you have just as much rights and responsibilities as your mom, as your dad, as our pastor, as me, who I'm standing up here talking to you. You have just those same rights and responsibilities. And so it's so exciting that you're taking upon that. And one of the things about being a father is, a new father, things kind of take a new picture. And as I was looking at your parents, and as particularly looking at your father, I could see the hopes that he has in your decision. I could see the fears that he has. I could see how much he loves you in his eyes. And I want you to know that as much as your mom and your dad love you, as much as your grandparents love you, your Heavenly Father loves you so much more. And He wants you to continue to make good decisions. I'm going to share a little bit out of 1 Nephi, and I'm going to share about Lehi's vision. And so if you have your scriptures and you want to follow along, I'm going to jump around a little bit because I don't usually think it's good to read 2 pages just straight out of the scriptures because I think most people kind of zone out. And so, but I'm going to be reading mostly out of first book of Nephi, chapter 2. And I'm going to kind of preface, I'm going to read a little bit, but I'll probably jump around. And so I'm going to start at verse 41, and it's about Lehi's vision. So some of you know Lehi's vision, and you probably think, well, I can just kind of plug that into my head, and I don't need to follow along. So we're going to start, though, at 1 Nephi, chapter 2, verse 41. And it came to pass that while my father tarried in the wilderness, he spake unto us, saying, Behold, I have dreamed a dream, or in other words, I have seen a vision. And behold, because of this thing which I have seen, I have reason to rejoice in the Lord because of Nephi, and also of Sam. For I have reason to suppose that they, and also many of their seed, will be saved. But behold, Laman and Lemuel, I fear exceedingly because of you. For behold, methought I saw in my dream a dark and dreary wilderness. And it came to pass that I saw a man, and he was dressed in a white robe, and he came and stood before me. And it came to pass that he spake unto me, and bade me follow him. And it came to pass that as I followed him, I beheld myself that I was in a dark and dreary waste. And after I have traveled for the space of many hours in the darkness, I began to pray unto the Lord, that he would have mercy on me according to the multitude of his tender mercies. And it came to pass, after I had prayed unto the Lord, I beheld a large and spacious field. And it came to pass that I beheld a tree whose fruit was desirable to make one happy. And so Lehi, as with many of us, he was concerned about his family. And he was thinking about his family, and the Lord provided him in a vision. In this vision, he had this tree. This tree had this wonderful fruit on it, and that's symbolic of the love of God. And we were able to partake of that as we go along, as we follow him. Further down, I'm going to jump down to 62. And I beheld a rod of iron, and it extended along the bank of the river, and it led to the tree by which I stood. And I also beheld a straight and narrow path, which came along by the rod of iron, even to the tree by which I stood. And it also led by the head of a fountain unto a large and spacious field, as if it had been a world. And so he has this tree, and there's in this field, and he has this rod that leads to the tree. So it's kind of like a path. And so at the other end, it's just like kind of like the world. And so the whole world's there, and there's this rod that takes him and will lead him to that tree. And it came to pass that they came forth. Oh, hold on. I think I've jumped too far. I'm going to jump back. I'm going to go back to 64. Or actually 65. And I saw numerous concourses of people. That just means lots and lots and lots of people. And so concourses are just a big old word. It just means lots and lots and lots of people. Many of whom were pressing forward, that they might obtain the path which led by the tree by which I stood. So he saw all these people going towards this tree that had the love of God there. And so all these people were going towards the love of God, which is a really good thing. And it came to pass that they did come forth and commence in the path which led to the tree. So they're following this, all these people are following, trying to get there. And it came to pass that there arose a mist of darkness, yea, even an exceeding great mist of darkness, insomuch that they who had commenced in the path did lose their way, that they wandered off and were lost. And so some people who were trying to get to the love of God, sometimes they got lost. That's what that's basically saying in a lot of big fancy words. And it came to pass that I beheld others pressing forward, and they came forth and caught hold of the end of the rod of iron. I think a lot of ways, Landon, what you've done today is you've kind of grabbed on that rod of iron. Because you know that there's a lot of things going on in life that are going to try to confuse you. And the rod of iron, it also talks about the scriptures being the rod of iron, so you want to grab hold of the scriptures because they're going to help lead you to the love of God. And they did press forward through a mist of darkness, clinging to the rod of iron, even until they came forth and partook of the fruit of the tree. And after they had partaken of the fruit of the tree, they did cast their eyes about as if they were ashamed. So even though sometimes you can get to the love of the Lord, sometimes things confuse you. And one of the things in 71 is kind of where I really want to talk about. And I also cast my eyes round about, and beheld on the other side of the river of water a great and spacious building. And it stood as if it were in the air, high above the earth. And it was filled with people, both old and young, both male and female. And their manner of dress was exceeding fine. So they dressed really fancy, is what that basically means. And they were in the attitude of mocking and pointing their fingers towards those who had come at and were partaking of the fruit. And so what that's talking about is there are times in life, and when I remember the first time I did some church work out in New Jersey, which is a long ways away from here, and I visited a city called just Atlantic City. And Atlantic City is kind of like Las Vegas in that it's all about gambling. But we went there because we were close by and we were trying to find a sub shop. And so we were trying to find this sub shop and we went to Atlantic City. But Atlantic City is all these big and fancy buildings. And it reminds me a whole lot of this. And a lot of the buildings have some really not good things that happen there. And it really reminded me of this scripture, how the Lord, but they looked really cool. And they were inviting. They said, oh, come on in, do these things. And there's a lot of times where in the world there's going to be a lot of things they're going to really try to entice you. Right now it might be things that distract you, where it's always going to your parents saying you want the newest and coolest toy. Now toys aren't bad, but lusting after those toys and always wanting more toys, that's not a good thing either. And so that right now that's that. When you get older, it's other things. There's always something that the world is trying to use and the Satan's trying to use to drag you away from following him. And so you always want to be thinking about, is this helping me stay hold that rod of iron and get to the love of God? Or is this trying to distract me and taking me away? And fortunately, have good godly parents who are always going to reinforce what those good things are. Because they're going to be praying and thinking, how can we make sure we're helping Landon? But you need to be thinking, how can I make sure I'm following the rod of iron and making sure I'm getting closer to the Lord? Because there's always going to be things that distract you. One thing I've found about sin is it's not always the big sin that gets you. It's the little tiny one that you think, okay, well, this isn't that bad. So you do that little tiny thing. And then there's the next little tiny thing that's maybe a little bit bigger. But because you did the first thing, it's not quite as bad. And it's just gradually taking you away. And so the Lord loves you so much. And the Lord wants you, Landon, to be always a follower of him, okay? And you know that we all make mistakes. I make mistakes, your parents make mistakes, and you know that when that happens, the Lord's always waiting there with open arms for us to repent and come back to him. But we always want to be focused on him, okay? That goes for everybody, because wherever you're at in life, there are times where that great and spacious building, it's always evolving. It's always changing, and it's always using different tools to try to draw us away. And the tools that might work on me might be completely different than the tools that work on somebody else, because Satan knows so much about how to try to drag us away. Also in life, it's important to always be focused on him, and always, one of the things I think is interesting about this is both the Lord and Satan know that we're a social people. And I think when I think back to in our life, have you ever been mocked? Mocking doesn't feel good. And the world is always mocking our beliefs and what the Lord would have us do. And I think one of the things that we can do that's most important to follow him is to gather together and to meet together often and to be part of a body. Because by doing that, the Lord knows that we're a social people, and it builds us up. And when the world is mocking what we believe and what we believe the Lord is leading us to, by gathering together, we're able to bolster our beliefs. And it's not always about being stricken down by the world. So Landon, it's been a great day, and you're going to remember this day for the rest of your life. But you always want to remember that it's not about just being dipped in the water and getting wet. It's not about having the hands laid upon you. It's about always trying to follow Jesus and try to do what he wants.